Chapter 119. Days passed by. When there were only 10 days left until the 9th of July, Yichen felt a bit strange. Why hadn't the higher-ups prepared to go to the Emerald Martial Palace yet? The Emerald Martial Palace was 70,000 miles away from the Sky Cloud Martial School. Even if he rode the half-beast horse, the Ghost-Eye Jade Lion, it would still take him 13 to 14 days to get there. Just like that, another 5 days passed. Yichen didn't care about going to the Emerald Martial Palace anymore. Since the higher-ups weren't in a hurry, why should he? The Emerald Martial Palace was not a place he wanted to go. The 7th of July. Yichen was training his Jin Qi in the yard. He was only one step away from the late condensing reality realm. Although it was impossible for him to make a breakthrough in a short period of time, he still wanted to give it a try. After all, for him, the difference between the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm and the late condensing reality realm was too huge. At least if he could reach the same cultivation level, he would be able to compete with all the young warriors, even if he had to face young Master North Snow or young Master Duanmu. Crack! The low-ranked soul stone in his hand cracked into 2 pieces. Yichen opened his eyes with a regretful look on his face. With his current cultivation level, it was still too difficult for him to make a breakthrough. It would still take him a while to reach the late condensing reality realm. Bang bang bang, suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Yichen thought it was Wu Zongming, so he yelled, "Coming." Opening the door of the yard, a young man that Yichen had never seen before appeared in front of him, wearing black clothes. "I am the executor disciple. The head elder asked me to inform you that it is time to go to the Emerald Martial Palace. Go to the welcoming plaza now," the young man said indifferently. Yichen was surprised. "Go now? Can I get there in 2 days?" Shaking his head, Yichen didn't understand, so he responded, "All right, I will go now." The executor disciple left. Yichen went back to his room, prepared a few sets of clothes and some necessities, then cleaned the room a bit, closed the door and walked to the welcoming plaza. On the grand and flat welcoming plaza, 4 people were standing there. The 2 people in the middle were the first elder, who was over 60 years old, and the 4th elder, who had a sturdy body. The sense of power released from their bodies was as deep as the ocean. One of them was Luo Hanshan, who was wearing a blue robe, and the other one was Su Jing, who was wearing a white robe. "Great Elder, 4th Elder." Yichen saluted the 2 elders. The Great Elder smiled and said, "Yichen, have you made any progress this month?" Hearing him, a smile also appeared on the 4th elder's face. They had already heard about how fast Yichen had improved. 1 year ago, he was still a Mortal Realm Stage 6 warrior, and now, he had already reached the peak of mid-condensing reality realm. Not to mention that he had a great comprehensive ability, he had mastered all the martial arts he had learned to the highest level. Bringing him to the Emerald Martial Palace this time was more or less to gain some face for the Sky Cloud Martial School. Otherwise, it would have been better to bring other core disciples. After all, compared to the top 5 core disciples, Yichen's foundation was still a bit weak. Yichen said, "I haven't made much progress in my cultivation, but I've just learned the Shocking Cloud swordsmanship." "You can't rush to raise your cultivation." "What? You've learned the Shocking Cloud swordsmanship?" The 4th elder slightly nodded, then he was shocked and stared at Yichen in shock. Yichen nodded. He didn't need to hide this kind of thing. Not to mention, with the attention he was getting now, he wouldn't be able to keep it a secret for too long. Lu Hanshan was shocked. Learning the Shocking Cloud swordsmanship in only a month? What kind of abnormal martial arts talent was this? The Shocking Cloud swordsmanship was a low-rank Earth Realm sword art. Ordinary people might not even be able to learn it in 5 years. If it were Lu Hanshan himself, it would take him at least half a year. In the entire Sky Cloud Martial School, perhaps only Zhu Mei could learn it in 3 to 4 months. However, compared to Yichen, the gap was not just a little bit, it was double or triple. The Great Elder couldn't believe it. Martial artists who have learned the Shocking Cloud swordsmanship will have a strong Shocking Cloud sword aura when they are fighting. He didn't continue his words, because Yichen's temperament suddenly changed. Wave after wave of illusory sword aura gushed out. His whole body seemed like a treasured sword that had been unsheathed. His sword aura was unstable, but it was filled with a horrifying explosive power. It is indeed the shocking cloud swordsmanship, I can't believe he can use it so easily. The great elder gasped in shock. He realized that he had underestimated Yi Chen after all. However, he couldn't blame himself, because a genius who had mastered the half-step sword intent was not someone he could easily guess. Among the three of them, only Su Jing didn't seem to be surprised. Caw! At this moment, a high-pitched bird song came from the top of the windy mountain. The bird song was short and high-pitched, along with a majestic aura. Yi Chen looked towards the direction of the sound and was surprised. On the precipitous peak, a giant bird swooped down. This giant bird had a majestic physique, and its wingspan was more than 10 meters. Its entire body was covered in dark green feathers, and under the sunlight, it glowed with a metallic luster. Its pair of claws could easily grab a house, and they were curved like an anchor. Lu Hanshan introduced the bird to Yi Chen. This is the guardian spirit beast of our Sky Cloud Martial School, Wind Vulture. Wind Vulture? Yi Chen had heard of this name before. In the easternmost area of the Windy Nation, there was a great devil grassland. There were countless demonic beasts living on the grassland, among which the half-demon horse, the ghost-eyed jade lion, was the most famous one. However, people living near the grassland didn't think so. In their eyes, the most famous demonic beast was the king of the great devil grassland, the fifth-level Wind Vulture. The Wind Vulture could travel over 40,000 miles per day, it was as fast as lightning, and was over 10 times faster than the half-demon horse. It was perfect for traveling, but it was not easy to catch it. Although it was only a fifth-level demonic beast, which was equivalent to a mid-clasping Yuan realm martial artist, even a late-clasping Yuan realm martial artist might not be able to catch up with it. Besides, even if a late-clasping Yuan realm martial artist managed to catch it, it would be extremely difficult to tame it. Yi Chen didn't expect that the Sky Cloud Martial School had a fifth-level Wind Vulture. No wonder they weren't in a hurry to go to the Emerald Martial School. With the Wind Vulture's speed, it would only take them 2 days to get there. Not only would it save them a lot of time and effort, it would also show the school's prestige. Whoosh! A fierce gust of wind blew, and the Wind Vulture landed in the middle of the plaza. The head elder said, "Come on up." After saying that, the head elder flashed across the air and landed on the Wind Vulture's broad and flat back. When everyone had boarded the Wind Vulture, the head elder reminded them, "Hold on, the Wind Vulture is very fast." Luo Hanshan grinned and said, "Head elder is right, the first time I rode on the Wind Vulture, I almost fell from the sky, it's unbelievably fast." Hearing this, Yi Chen and Su Jing didn't dare to be careless, they both silently activated their Jin Qi. Whoosh! Whoosh! The Wind Vulture fiercely flapped its wings for a few times, then suddenly leaped up into the air like a sharp arrow. The Wind Vulture's wings were tucked behind its back to reduce the air resistance. The speed of the Wind Vulture, which was close to the sound barrier, was unimaginably fast, as if it was riding on a rocket. The air that was blowing towards its face was no different than a sharp knife, cutting its skin. Yi Chen planted his feet on the ground, and activated his protective Jin Qi to protect his face from the knife-like air currents. Soon, the Wind Vulture flew high up into the clouds, flying far away. Chapter 120. Above the ocean of clouds, the Wind Vulture flapped its wings and flew hundreds of meters away. The shrill, long-lasting sonic booms behind it didn't reach anyone's ears, because the Wind Vulture's flying speed had already surpassed the speed of sound. The head elder and the fourth elder were standing in front of the Wind Eagle's back like two towering mountains, relieving most of the pressure on Yi Chen and the other two. Otherwise, only the strong airflow caused by the supersonic speed of the eagle could easily blow them away and make them fall from the sky. Brother Yi, you have to be mentally prepared for this trip to the Emerald Martial Palace. I believe you also know why the higher-ups want you to come with us. Su Jing abruptly used her Jin Qi to talk to Yi Chen. Yi Chen nodded. Why isn't senior sister Zhu Mei here? None of the head disciples from the top 4 martial institutions will go there, unless one of them has reached the clasping Yuan realm and is on par with young Master Emerald. I see. Yichen thought for a while and realized that Zhu Mei was right. If Zhu Mei went, she would inevitably be compared with young Master Emerald. But now, she didn't want to go. So, everyone could only compare the second disciples of each martial institution. Just then, the fourth elder said to Yi Chen and the other two with his Jinqi, "There is a large number of flesh demons in front of us, be careful not to get sucked into them." Flesh demon? Yi Chen froze for a second. This was a kind of demonic beast that floated in the air without any intelligence. It was shaped like a huge meatball and had a lot of scary-looking mouths. Normally, 3 mouths would be a rank 1 meat beast, 6 mouths would be a rank 2 meat beast, 9 mouths would be a rank 3 meat beast, and so on and so forth. Flesh demons usually lived by inhaling and exhaling the chi of heaven and earth. Occasionally, they would eat meat. Before he could think about it, disgusting meatballs appeared in the vast sea of clouds in front of him. These meatballs were brownish-red in color, and their bodies were covered with mouths with sharp teeth. The largest one was no different from a small mountain, and the smallest one was the size of a water buffalo. They floated in the air with the wind, and if a flying beast passed by, they would open their mouths and release a terrifying suction force, swallowing it into their stomachs. Sky-burning palm. The wind vulture was incredibly fast. Seeing that it was about to break into the group of meat spirit beasts, the fourth elder let out a resonant growl and pushed his palm out. Rumble. A large number of flesh demons exploded and were burned into nothingness. The shockwave even tore a large hole in the sea of clouds. Yi Chen was secretly shocked. Late clasping Yuan realm martial artists are indeed extraordinary. Every single move of theirs has the destructive power to destroy mountains. Suddenly, the wind vulture swayed intensely and slowed down. The few of them turned their heads to look. Unbeknownst to them, a meatball the size of a small hill had appeared on their right rear. The largest mouth on the meatball was wide open, sucking in the air and the sea of clouds in a spiral. It was like a huge bottomless pit, swallowing everything. Yi Chen and the other two had low cultivation bases, so they were about to be sucked out. The first elder made his move. He raised the index and middle fingers of his right hand and drew a line in the air. Puchi. A purplish-golden ray of light extended out. It was as sharp as a blade, and it split the meatball into 2. The cut was smooth, without a trace of roughness. The fourth elder said in admiration, "A 5th-grade meat beast's defensive power is even more terrifying than a real mountain. It seems that your purple light finger has already reached the highest level. It can cut a mountain as if it was nothing." Ah, it took me over 10 years to reach the highest level of this mid-rank earth realm finger art. I can't compare with you. The first elder gave a bitter smile. Yi Chen was speechless. The first elder was obviously talking about him. Hearing him, the fourth elder was speechless again. He had seen all kinds of geniuses, but he had never seen a genius who could learn a low-rank earth realm martial art within a month. What a freak! Above another piece of sea of clouds, a hazy white light flashed like a bolt of lightning. It seemed to be able to travel a mile within a blink of an eye. If one looked carefully, one would be able to see that the white light was actually a huge white bird. The white bird had a strong and muscular body, with a pair of dark yellow claws under its belly. There were 4 people standing on the back of the white bird. The leading 2 were over 40 years old. They were wearing white robes with golden edges and snowflake patterns on the cuffs. Behind the 2 were 2 young men. The one on the left had a strong and muscular build. He was a head taller than the 2 in front. His eyes were extremely sharp and aggressive, as if he was being attacked by a heavy blade. The one on the right looked ordinary, wearing white robes. If he was thrown into a crowd, it would be hard to find him. However, when one looked at his eyes, one would feel that he was not ordinary at all. His pure crystal-like eyes gave people a soul-stirring feeling. The blade light seemed to be invisible, it seemed to be able to transform into the blade intent. It was indeed the North Snow Quick Blade Lynch. As for the strong and muscular teenager, He was the second core disciple of the North Snow Martial Academy, Blade Yu. We, the North Snow Martial Academy, never liked to fight. But even though we don't like to fight, it's still a shame to fall behind others. You two have to work hard. The middle-aged man on the right reminded them with a smile on his face. Yu chuckled and said, I admit that I am no match for Zhuang Fei. But except for him, I, Yu, am not afraid of anyone in the younger generation of the Windy Nation. At this moment, the bearded middle-aged man, who seemed to be the leader of the group, sighed and said, in recent years, the North Snow Martial Academy has started to lose its strength. There haven't been any outstanding geniuses appearing in the ranking competitions of the inner disciples. However, the Sky Cloud Martial School is quite lucky. They actually have a disciple who has mastered the half-step sword intent. Lynch's eyes lit up. He was believed by the leader of the group, Shui Wuren, to be the one who had the highest chance of mastering the blade intent. Now that he knew that there was a disciple who had mastered the half-step sword intent and was only one step away from mastering the real sword intent, he was a bit excited. The rain was pouring down. A loach-like black-scaled demonic beast was swimming in the sea of clouds. Every time it lurked and reappeared, it would be several hundred meters away. Coupled with its huge body and terrifying appearance, ordinary people would think that a legendary evil dragon had appeared in the world and was going to harm the human world. Junior Sister Yuan, you've made great progress in the past few months. Otherwise, we wouldn't have asked you to come with us to the Emerald Martial Palace. There were 5 people standing on the beast's head. A young man with an umbrella said to the tall girl with a smile. The tall girl had a pretty face and a pair of straight and long legs. If Yi Chen were here, he would definitely recognize her. She was indeed Yuan Xuemei, who had helped the Ling family with the mission. Compared to a few months ago, her qi was much more powerful. Obviously, she had made great progress. Yuan Xuemei smiled lightly and said, I think the elders want me to see the world. Plus, following Brother Nan Gong will definitely not be a bad thing. How come all the female disciples of the Rudra Martial School are so talkative? I am the only one who is dumb. The young man with the umbrella said sarcastically. Hee hee. Yuan Xuemei laughed. Caw! From afar, an ear-piercing beast roar came out, shaking the sea of clouds. The elder of the Rudra Martial School, who was standing in the front, raised his head and looked over, but couldn't see anything. He murmured to himself, it should be the double-headed Bat King from the Purple Sun Martial School, it is quite fast. A few hundred miles away from the black-scaled demon beast, a black-red two-headed bat with a wingspan of more than 10 meters swept across the sky. On the back of the bat, 4 people were standing. One of them was Ouyang Ming, who had a conflict with Yi Chen in the Northwest Auction House. Beside him was a short and skinny teenager, who looked very ordinary, even a bit ugly, which formed a sharp contrast with Ouyang Ming. Piercing through the sea of clouds, the 4 of them rushed towards the southwest. Chapter 121. July 8, afternoon. The wind vulture darted out of the clouds and lowered its speed to below the speed of sound. Yi Chen only felt his vision brighten, and the mountains and rivers below were all imprinted in his eyes. But very quickly, he was dumbfounded. In the area of 500 kilometers below, the mountain peaks rose and fell without end. Some were lofty and majestic, some were verdant and elegant, some were shaped like dragons, and some were crouching like tigers. The dense energy of heaven and earth converged into a thin layer of mist that coiled around the peaks of the mountain peaks, and it gave off a special feeling of immortality. Between the mountains were lakes of various sizes. Looking down from above, the smallest of the lakes was only the size of a fingernail. They were scattered all over the place, and they were of various colors. At a glance, it was impossible to tell how many there were. In the center of this area, dozens of precipitous mountain peaks converged to form a valley. The color of the valley was dark green, like the primordial jadeite formed by heaven and earth, exquisite without losing its grandeur. Looking inside, there were hundreds of lakes of various sizes in the valley. Buildings were built around the lakes in an orderly fashion, contrasting with the environment outside the valley, forming a large and a small scene. What a wonderful place! Yichen opened his mouth and spat out these words. Luo Hanshan explained to Yichen, there are a total of 1,332 mountains and 9,800 lakes around the Emerald Martial Palace, which is known as the 1,000 Mountains and 10,000 Rivers. Apart from this, on the mountains that form the Emerald Martial Palace, there is a kind of stone called fragrant jade, which emits a nice aroma all year round, and is called jade fragrance. Combining these two, it becomes the famous 1,000 Mountains and 10,000 Rivers, jade fragrance. Once the martial artists from the Windy Nation and even other nations mention this name, they will definitely think of the rank 7 martial institution, the Emerald Martial Palace. Yichen praised, thousands of mountains and tens of thousands of rivers, jadeite fragrance lingers, it really makes one daydream. The head elders snorted coldly and said, it is indeed a paradise, but the Emerald Martial Palace is only a latecomer. 3,000 years ago, the rank 6 martial institution, mountain and water pavilion, used to occupy this place. That's right. Back then, the Emerald Martial Palace was just a small, unranked martial institution. The first leader of the Emerald Martial Palace accidentally found the ruins of the mountain and water pavilion, and found the incomplete, great art of mountain and water, from there. He trained hard for more than 10 years, and once he was born, he became famous in the martial world, and built a solid foundation for the Emerald Martial Palace. The fourth elder's voice was filled with envy and passion. It was a remnant of the great art of landscape. It seemed to be very powerful. Yichen thought. The wind vulture flew over thousands of mountains and rivers, arriving at the entrance of the Emerald Valley. The entrance of the valley had a radius of hundreds of zhang, and the terrain was flat. Quite a few famous warriors had entered the valley in groups, and some important ones had also come on the back of their beasts, just like the Sky Cloud Martial School. But of course, the mounts of their beasts were obviously not as good as the wind vultures. The wind vulture landed on the ground along with a fierce gale. An outer elder of the Emerald Martial Palace walked up to them with 4 deacons. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for not going out to greet you. The head elder let the wind vulture move freely, then grinned and said, it seems that we've arrived first. The Sky Cloud Martial School has been very high profile recently. You're number 1 in everything, but what's the point of fighting for number 1 in small matters? The double-headed giant bat flew over quickly, and the middle-aged man in the lead opened his mouth and said. The fourth elder's face was filled with displeasure. The middle-aged man's name was Zhu Li, and he was about the same age as the first elder. Because he practiced a special cultivation technique, he looked to be in his 40s, and his qi and blood were vigorous. Taking a deep breath, the fourth elder raised his voice and said, I didn't believe it at first. It turns out that people from the Purple Sun Martial House all have loud voices. I heard your roar from tens of miles away. Having a loud voice isn't a bad thing. I'm just afraid that some people don't have the energy to shout loudly. The two-headed bat landed on the ground. Zhu Li took the lead and walked down. Look! The Sky Cloud Martial School and the Purple Sun Martial School are arguing again. Among the top 5 martial institutions, the Purple Sun Martial School and the Sky Cloud Martial School have the most grievances. I heard that when the Sky Cloud Martial School was encircling the remaining forces of the 9 evil cult, the Purple Sun Martial School set up a trap for the Sky Cloud Martial School, causing a lot of powerful martial artists of the Sky Cloud Martial School to suffer heavy casualties. After a few years, the Sky Cloud Martial School was reduced to a rank 9 martial institution. However, the Sky Cloud Martial School was not a force to be trifled with. They released fake news and tricked the previous leader of the Purple Sun Martial School to the place where the remaining forces of the 9 evil cult gathered, causing him to die without a complete corpse. There's such a secret. No wonder the two forces have always been like fire and water. Many people nearby were discussing in low voices. Normally, people from the Emerald Martial Palace would be happy to see the two forces fighting each other to the death. However, this was the territory of the Emerald Martial Palace, and tomorrow was the celebration banquet. If they really let them fight, the Emerald Martial Palace would lose all of its face. A few outer elders of the Emerald Martial Palace hurriedly said, Your accommodations have been prepared, please follow us. Zhu Li flicked his sleeves and left. Ouyang Ming, who was behind him, threw a meaningful glance at Yi Chen. On the other side, the head elder's anger disappeared. He said to Yi Chen and the others, "Let's go." After the two groups of people had left, it suddenly started raining. The black-scaled beast carried the people from the Rudra Martial School to this place. Inside the Emerald Martial Palace, numerous lakes appeared in front of them, all calm and peaceful. The Emerald Martial Palace is indeed a rank 7 martial institution. It is indeed a beautiful place. Wow, compared to this place, my place is like a mountain, totally not at the same level. The lotuses in the lake are all precious herbs, the green lotus. And those fishes, they are all rare ancient fishes. Hearing people's praises, Yi Chen had to admit that in terms of environment, the windy mountain of the Sky Cloud Martial School was miles ahead of the Emerald Martial Palace. It was not even worth mentioning. He wondered how the environment of the North Snow Martial Academy, which was also a rank 7 martial institution, would be. There were many people who came to congratulate the Emerald Martial Palace. Those who did not have much influence were basically arranged to stay near the lakes in the outer area of the Emerald Martial Palace, where there were many beautiful courtyards. Those who had some influence were arranged to stay in the inner area, where the environment was much better. As one of the top 5 martial institutions, the Sky Cloud Martial School was arranged to stay in the innermost area, which was close to the main buildings of the Emerald Martial Palace. On the road between the lakes, Yi Chen inadvertently glanced over, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. In front of him, a group of young men and women in green robes were talking and laughing. Judging from the Jin Qi vibration, they were not any weaker than the top-ranked inner disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School. 2 of them were releasing immeasurable Jin Qi, which meant that they had obviously reached the level of the top-ranked core disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School. The one on the left had a graceful figure and an extremely beautiful appearance, like an orchid in a deserted valley. Her every move attracted the thoughts of the male disciples. Standing next to her was a tall and straight male disciple. He was handsome and had a noble temperament. There was a faint aura of a king on his body. He was obviously not an ordinary person. Luo Hanshan, who was standing beside Yi Chen, recognized the beautiful girl. She was Ji Shuiyan, who had accompanied the Palm and Lu Wuxiang to visit the Sky Cloud Martial School half a year ago. She was a disciple of the Ji family, and judging from what had happened that day, she seemed to be closely related to Yi Chen. "Brother Yi, we have arrived at our place, let's go." Luo Hanshan patted on Yi Chen's shoulder. Yi Chen took back his sight, his expression didn't change at all. Led by an outer elder of the Emerald Martial Palace, the 5 of them walked towards the luxurious yard beside the huge lake. From afar, Ji Shuiyan saw that familiar silhouette and slightly frowned. The tall and handsome male disciple standing beside her asked with concern, "Sister Ji, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Brother sure." Ji Shuiyan was sure that that man was Yi Chen. She didn't expect that after half a year, he, who was only at Mortal Realm Stage 6, had already reached such a high level. If that was all, she wouldn't have been too surprised. But what she didn't expect was that besides the rapid improvement of his cultivation, he had also mastered the half-step sword intent, which was the dream of every sword artist. In just a couple of days, the name Yi Chen had spread across the entire Windy Nation. Among all the martial artists, there wasn't a single person who didn't know about him. His fame had even caught up with the top and second disciples of all the top martial institutions. Chapter 122. The luxurious yard was called the Green Willow House. It had a main yard and 7 small yards. Yi Chen lived in the small yard on the east side. Obviously, the yard had been thoroughly cleaned. There was not a single leaf on the ground, the corners were clean, and the flowers in the small garden in the middle had also been carefully trimmed. Entering the room, Yi Chen saw that the tables and chairs were all shiny and clean, and had a faint aroma. After looking around for a while, Yi Chen walked out. When he walked past Su Jing's yard, he heard a thunderous sound coming from inside. Yi Chen smiled. Su Jing had always been a quiet girl. She would only cultivate when she had nothing to do. She rarely took the initiative to communicate with others. After their last meeting, Su Jing only nodded to greet Yi Chen. Without disturbing her, Yi Chen started to walk away. Outside the yard was a sparkling lake. Every 100 meters around the lake, there was a yard that was as luxurious as the green willow house. Beside the lake, rows of willows were planted. The willows were touching the water surface, swaying along with the breeze. The Emerald Martial Palace is indeed a rank 7 institution. Even the place they use to receive their guests is so beautiful. Yi Chen took a deep breath. He felt that the natural yuan qi around him was much richer and purer than in the Windy Mountain. It was also easier to convert it into Jin qi. After enjoying the view for a while, Yi Chen was about to go back to his yard to cultivate. Yi Chen. A tall girl walked towards him along the lake. It was Yuan Xuemei from the Rudra Martial School. Yi Chen smiled, long time no see. How did you know I was here? Guests from influential institutions all live beside this lake. I saw you when I walked out of the yard. Yuan Xuemei stopped 3 meters in front of Yi Chen. Yi Chen nodded, then suddenly said in surprise, "You have reached the late condensing reality realm. Congratulations. There's nothing to congratulate me about. You, on the other hand, have improved a bit too fast. Not only have you reached the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm in just a few months, you have also managed to comprehend the half-step sword intent, which even I am jealous of. Sigh, comparisons are always odious." Yuan Xuemei said with admiration and admiration. Yi Chen rubbed his nose, the news travels fast. Of course. Yuan Xuemei rolled her eyes at Yi Chen and said, "Everything else is fine, but the fact that you've already comprehended the half-step sword intent is way too shocking. Even the leader of our Rudra Martial School had praised you as a top genius, a rare sword artist from the Windy Nation, and that you have a great chance to comprehend the true sword intent. You didn't call me just to praise me, did you?" Hearing him, Yuan Xuemei looked at Yi Chen with hope and said, "How did you master the half-step sword intent? Do you have any experience to share with me?" Just like Yi Chen, she was the #1 inner disciple of the Rudra Martial School. Her fighting power was no weaker than ordinary core disciples. If she could master a little bit of the sword intent, her power would definitely increase. Besides, if she could master a little bit of the sword intent, it would be much easier for her to step into the next level. Originally, she didn't have any plans, but the person who was closest to mastering the sword intent was Yi Chen. So it was better to ask him than to try and figure it out herself. Yi Chen smiled bitterly in his mind, so she came here for the sword intent. I don't really know much about the sword intent, but if you want to talk about experience, I do have some. Tell me about it. Yuan Xuemei's eyes lit up. Yi Chen said, "The spirit, qi, and soul are perfectly merged into one point under the control of nature, and then released in the form of a sword. I think this should be the initial form of the sword intent." Of course, Yi Chen wouldn't say too much. In his words, there were not only the ancient explanations, but also his own thoughts. All in all, it was ambiguous and mysterious. Yuan Xuemei was lost in her thoughts. After a long while, she came back to her senses and said with a happy face, "Thank you so much. I can feel that the sword intent has become much clearer in my mind. Maybe I can really figure it out. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about this." Even if Yi Chen didn't care about it, she wouldn't say it out loud. Everyone was selfish. If one less person could master the sword intent, they would feel superior. Yi Chen was surprised. Is it really that easy to understand? However, what he did not know was that the true spirit continent was full of martial arts, and there were a lot of things that were hard to understand. Compared to that, what he said was already very easy to understand. At least, for Yuan Xuemei, Yi Chen was already a powerful person in her heart. I can't take advantage of you for nothing. This is a sword manual, I found it by accident. Although it's very ordinary and doesn't have much value, it can be used as a guide for sword artists. Yuan Xuemei took out a thin book from her storage ring and handed it to Yi Chen. Yi Chen took it and took a look. On the cover of the book, there were 2 ancient characters, sword manual. Alright, I'll go back and try to understand it. Yuan Shuimei immediately said goodbye. She was afraid that if she stayed here for too long, that trace of understanding would disappear. Watching Yuan Shuimei's back as she left, Yichen put away the sword manual and went back to the Green Willow House. Deep inside the main building of the Emerald Martial Palace, next to a crescent-shaped lake. The courtyard here was different from other places. It was tall, large, and magnificent. It was built with precious stones and covered a large area. Sister Ji, don't you want to come in and have a seat? Outside the courtyard, a male disciple with a noble aura asked Ji Shuiyan to stay. Ji Shuiyan shook her head and said, "No, Brother Shi, I'll go first." After saying that, she turned around and left. The male disciple, who was called Brother Shi, had a bad look on his face. He punched a huge hole in the thick wall of the courtyard without using any Jin Qi. "Brother Shi, I'm Cui Shiming." At this moment, footsteps came from behind. The male disciple with a noble aura turned around, frowned and said, "What are you doing here?" It was Cui Shiming, who was 17 or 18 years old, and was quite handsome. He was the one who had lost to Yichen before. He forced a smile. He was a bit scared of the man in front of him. This man was not an ordinary core disciple, he was one of the top 4 core disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace, the Stone Man Shirpatian. He was as powerful as the extreme palm Lu Wuxiang, and was only second to the young Master Emerald, who had already stepped into the clasping Yuan realm. "Brother Shi, are you interested in Ji Shuiyan?" Cui Shiming smiled and asked. Shi Potion's face darkened. "Don't get involved in things that you shouldn't get involved in. Otherwise, don't blame me for being cruel." Cui Shiming hurriedly said, "Brother Shi, you misunderstood me. Why would I get involved in your business? I wouldn't dare to do that." "Then what do you mean?" "Brother Shi, do you know about Yichen?" "I do. Isn't he the famous Sky Cloud Martial School disciple who has comprehended the half-step sword intent? What does he have to do with him?" Cui Shiming said in a low voice, "Brother Shi, you still don't know about it, do you? The one who was engaged to Ji Shuiyan is Yichen. It's him." Shirpatian indeed knew that Ji Shuiyan was engaged to Yichen, but it was cancelled later. However, he didn't know who it was. Indeed, Yichen is the one who was engaged to Ji Shuiyan. Back then, he was still a useless cultivator, and was not even noticed by Ji Shuiyan. But now, that useless cultivator has become a genius who has comprehended the half-step sword intent. It's hard to say that Ji Shuiyan won't be interested in him. Chapter 123. Hearing him, Shirpatian recalled that 2 hours ago, Ji Shuiyan's expression had obviously changed. She must have seen that disciple from the Sky Cloud Martial School named Yichen. Thinking about the fact that these two used to be engaged, Shirpatian could not help but feel jealous and angry. The woman he loved would never be allowed to have any relationship with anyone else, even if that relationship was no longer there. He would still be very unhappy. This Yichen, he needed to teach him a lesson. Looking at Cui Shiming, Shirpatian asked, "Do you have a grudge against Yichen?" Cui Shiming's face showed a ferocious expression. "This guy is evil and cunning. He defeated me and made me lose face in front of my junior sister Yi Xian." He had liked Yi Xian for a long time. Their relationship was quite good before, but ever since he had been beaten by Yichen, she would only greet him coldly whenever she saw him, which was a huge blow to his self-esteem. He wished he could go back in time and kill Yichen until there was nothing left of him. Shirpatian sneered. Obviously, Yi Xian wasn't telling the truth, but he didn't want to expose him. "You can leave now," Shirpatian said. Cui Shiming was confused. "Brother Shi, are we just going to let him go like this?" "Let him go. Dream on. Tomorrow, during the celebration banquet, the disciples of the major sects will compare notes with each other. At that time, I will challenge him and make him lose face in front of everyone. It would be best if I can make him lose his mind. In this way, I can justifiably cripple him." If it was possible, Shirpatian wanted to kill Yichen right now. With his power, he could still do it. The so-called half-step sword intent was not even worth mentioning in front of absolute power. Cui Shiming was startled by Shirposhin's tone. He thought about all the people who had gone against him in the past, who were either killed or crippled, unable to continue their cultivation for the rest of their lives. Cui Shiming could not help but feel happy. Yi Chen, if you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too famous and making me lose face in front of Sister Yi Xian. Once you become a cripple, I will treat you well. After Cui Shiming left, Shirpadian murmured to himself, Junior Sister Ji, I will let you know that a loser will always be a loser. Even if you have comprehended the half-step sword intent, you are still a loser in front of me. Humph. The night came and the stars shone brightly. Every big and small lake in the Emerald Martial Palace was reflecting a bright moon. Beside the bright moon were many lotus clouds, high up in the sky. In the middle of Green Willow House, Yi Chen turned on the crystal light in the room and was reading the sword scripture. The sword scripture was not a secret book. It talked about the ancient swordsman's understanding of sword principles. Some of the theories were very shallow, and some were very profound. Just a word or two was enough to make people ponder endlessly. Some didn't talk about sword arts, but about mentality. What mentality could make people enter the best state, and what mentality could make people have a chance to break through the shackles of sword arts. There were even some descriptions of sword will, but it was very mysterious. Good book. Yi Chen couldn't help but praise. Although this sword scripture couldn't directly improve one's fighting ability and sword art, it could help a swordsman gain a lot of theoretical knowledge. Theoretical knowledge should never be underestimated. For a martial artist, he might be able to become a powerful warrior without any theoretical knowledge, but he would never be able to become a great master. A great master would need to have a huge knowledge base. Only in this way, he would be able to learn from hundreds of different schools of thought, and create his own path and theory. As he immersed himself in the contents of the sword scripture, Yi Chen gradually forgot about the time. Outside the yard, the moonlight was like water, and the stars were shining brightly. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew over from afar, stirring up a part of the lake. The head elder and the others, who were resting, were all confused. Just now, they had sensed that there was a sharp chi flashing past, but when they tried to sense it carefully, they couldn't find anything. It was like it was just an illusion. Su Jing, who was meditating, opened her eyes. She subconsciously thought of Yi Chen, then closed her eyes and ignored him. There were only 13 pages in the sword scripture. Although Yi Chen had read it very carefully, he still finished it in less than half an hour. After waking up from his meditation, Yi Chen felt that his mind had become much clearer. Holding the hilt of the hidden cloud sword in his hand, Yi Chen could feel it even more clearly. He felt like something obscure was about to burst out from the bottom of his heart, which was extremely mysterious. It was the sword intent. After thinking for a while, Yi Chen found that his half-step sword intent had become even more solid. At his level, he had already reached a bottleneck, and breaking through it was not something that could be done in a day or two. He had to spend a long time to polish the sharpness of his sword intent. On the contrary, even if there was only a slight improvement, he would be able to clearly sense it. If it was the half-step sword intent before, then now it was a step further from the half-step sword intent. There was only a thin layer of thin gauze between the half-step sword intent and the real sword intent. As long as there was a slight breeze, the gauze would be lifted, and the essence of the sword intent would emerge in his heart. Letting out a long breath, Yi Chen murmured to himself, I did not expect that a normal sword spell could be so useful. It saved me a lot of time to train, and with just a little bit of comprehension, I will be able to master the sword intent in no time. I really have to thank you for this. Yuan Xuemei. At this moment, if Yuan Xuemei knew that Yi Chen had gained a lot from the sword scripture, she would definitely be stunned. She had been studying this sword scripture for a long time, but she couldn't find anything special about it. At most, it had made her fighting style more practical. Standing up, Yi Chen opened the window and looked at the moonlight for a while. After a while, when he had calmed down, Yi Chen closed the window and started his daily Jin Qi training. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, the lake was shrouded in a thin layer of mist, which looked pure and holy. The quiet Emerald Martial Palace gradually became lively, filled with people's voices. Some of the leaders of the big forces who couldn't make it to the Sky Cloud Martial School yesterday had also arrived. The scene was 10 times more spectacular than the inner disciple ranking competition of the Sky Cloud Martial School. After all, young Master Emerald had stepped into the Clasping Yuan realm, which was not something a small inner disciple ranking competition could compare with. If everything went well, in the next 10 years, young Master Emerald would definitely become the pillar of the Emerald Martial Palace, and his fame would definitely not be any less than the leaders of the top 5 martial institutions. During the celebration banquet, the most outstanding disciples from the top martial institutions will definitely compete with each other. At that time, we will be able to watch the top geniuses of the Windy Nation fight. Unfortunately, those top disciples won't come, otherwise it would be a grand occasion. It's already very good. People like North Snow Fastblade Lynch and Stoneman Sherpodian are basically as powerful as young Master North Snow and young Master Duanmu. Only young Master Emerald, who has stepped into the Clasping Yuan realm, is more powerful than the others. That's right, it's really scary. In the Emerald Martial Palace, it's already quite good to have one genius at the child level. In addition to young Master Emerald, the Absolute Palm Lu Wuxiang and the Stoneman Sherpodian are both at this level. Plus the Traceless Snow Ji Shuiyan who has recently emerged, there are 3 of them in total. Yeah, the Emerald Martial Palace has never been short of top geniuses. Although Lu Wuxiang and Sherpodian are listed in the second group of young generation in the Windy Nation, everyone knows that they are definitely the top of the second group. They are almost as powerful as young Master Duanmu and young Master North Snow. On the road between the lakes, some people who had just arrived were discussing with each other. Chapter 124. In the Green Willow House. After washing up, Yichen came to the main yard of the head elder's residence. In the yard, Luo Hanshan and Su Jing were already waiting there. After a while, the head elder and the 4th elder walked out of the hall. The head elder glanced at the 3 of them and said, "Let's go." On the way. The head elder reminded Yichen, "Don't let your emotions get the better of you during the competition. Remember, you are representing the entire Sky Cloud Martial School, not just yourself." "I know." Yichen nodded. Luo Hanshan, who was standing beside him, grinned and said, "Unless someone is trying to hurt you, nothing too embarrassing will happen. Besides, Su Jing and I will stand in front of you." The current Luo Hanshan was different from half a year ago. Back then, he had just regained his title as a genius, and couldn't wait to prove himself. Therefore, he agreed to fight against the Palm Master Lu Wuxiang without hesitation. But now, Luo Hanshan was friendly and calm, giving people a sense of confidence. "Hanshan, I know that you have made great progress in the past half a year, but don't underestimate Lu Wuxiang and Sherpodian, they are not simple people." The 4th elder interrupted. Luo Hanshan responded, "Don't worry, 4th elder, I know what I'm doing." There was a large river between the main buildings of the Emerald Martial Palace and the outside world. Over the river, there were 3 magnificent stone bridges, each of which was 33 zhang long and 15 zhang wide, which could allow 10 horses to cross side by side without feeling crowded at all. At the moment, people were moving on the stone bridges, heading towards the main buildings. After crossing the bridge, an outer elder of the Emerald Martial Palace walked up to them. "My friends, the celebration will be held in the Baohua Square, please follow me." The head elder nodded and followed behind the elder. After a while, the Baohua Square appeared in front of them. The square, which was hundreds of zhang wide, was entirely white with a hint of cyan, shining with a faint light, as if it was made from a giant piece of jade. It looked magnificent and noble. Seats had already been arranged on the square, and a third of the people had already taken their seats, while the rest of the people kept coming. "This way, please." The outer elder of the Emerald Martial Palace led them to the second seat on the right-hand side of the main seat. The first seat was for the Rudra Martial School, and opposite to them were the North Snow Martial Academy and the Purple Sun Martial School. Judging from this, the Sky Cloud Martial School was ranked last among the top 5 martial institutions. The Great Elder didn't think much of it. He nodded and sat down. The fourth elder, Yi Chen, and the others took their seats. Turning his head, Yi Chen saw Yuan Xuemei, who was smiling at him with a bright and beautiful smile. Looking at the other side, Ouyang Ming, who was tall and sturdy, first looked at Luo Hanshan with a scornful smile, then looked at Yi Chen with an even more scornful look. Second brother, was that young Master Hanshan, Luo Hanshan, really that powerful? The ugly teenager sitting next to Ouyang Ming asked. Ouyang Ming responded plainly, why are you bringing up the past? How could he be as powerful as a young master now? Young Master Hanshan has already become a joke. I think the Windy Nation should re-rank the top 4 young masters. Get rid of young Master Emerald, who is not at the same level as us, and kick out young Master Hanshan, then there will still be 2 places left for the top 4 young masters. Eldest brother and second brother should be able to make it on the list. I have already thought of the names. Eldest brother will be called young Master Ben Lei, and second brother, you will be called young Master Godly Legs. The ugly teenager was very talkative and said flatteringly. Ouyang Ming paused for a second. Young Master Godly Legs was not a bad name. Suddenly, his face turned serious. He pretended to be angry and said, don't talk nonsense, I don't deserve to be called a young master. The ugly teenager noticed Ouyang Ming's expression. He knew that Ouyang Ming wasn't angry at all, so he immediately added fuel to the fire. I am telling the truth, second brother, it's just that you became famous a little bit later. If you beat young Master Hanshan today, you will definitely become one of the top 4 young masters. Young Master Hanshan, I will beat him, I hope he can make me serious. Ouyang Ming squinted his eyes. On the other side, Yi Chen sneered in his mind. With his powerful soul power, he had heard their conversation clearly. This Ouyang Ming and the ugly teenager were indeed arrogant. Not to mention young Master Hanshan, even the North Snow Fast Blade Lynch from the North Snow Martial Academy was not that easy to deal with. When the red sun rose from the east, almost all the seats on the square were occupied. Only the people from the Emerald Martial Palace, who were the hosts, had not arrived yet. After a while, the door of the palace on top of the Baohua Square suddenly opened, and a group of people walked out. The man in the lead was about 40 years old. He was handsome, with a long beard on his chin. He didn't look aggressive at all. Instead, he looked more gentle and elegant, like a middle-aged scholar who had read a lot of books. He gave people a perfect first impression. Leader Zhuang, how have you been? Leader Zhuang, congratulations. Down below, all the leaders of the big parties stood up and cupped their fists. The middle-aged man had a big smile on his face. He waved his hand and signaled everyone to sit down. He had an indescribable aura around him. Who else could it be other than the leader of the Emerald Martial Palace, Zhuang Qingxian? Yi Chen slightly frowned. He didn't know why, but when he saw the middle-aged man, the image of Yu Buchuan from the wuxia novels flashed across his mind. On both sides of Zhuang Qingxian were 8 inner elders. Each of them had a powerful and immeasurable aura, almost as powerful as the head elder, and the 2 in the front were even more powerful than the head elder. Behind them were the 3 core disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace, Lu Wuxiang with a cold face, Shirpatian with a noble temperament, and Ji Shuiyan with a beautiful face. The last one was a male disciple with extremely white skin, who was even more handsome than a girl, and who had a pair of green eyes that flashed with an evil light. As the people from the Emerald Martial Palace sat down, Zhuang Qingxian said with a loud voice, "Today is my son Zhuang Fei's birthday celebration. Thank you all for coming all the way to the Emerald Martial Palace, it is my honor." Leader Zhuang, what are you talking about? You have already given us face by inviting us here. That's right, the Emerald Martial Palace is the #1 martial institution in the Windy Nation. How could we not come? The celebration is about to start. Why hasn't your son shown up yet? Zhuang Qingxian smiled. He was very satisfied with the atmosphere. After today, the Emerald Martial Palace's dominant position would be even more unshakable, and they would completely dominate the other 4 martial institutions. Everyone, please wait for a moment, my son will be here soon. As soon as Zhuang Qingxian's voice faded, a young man walked out of the palace. As if he was affected by an invisible force field, everyone's eyes were focused on him. The young man was about 18 or 19 years old, he had a jade-like face, and a pair of eyes that looked like stars in the sky, shining brightly. He was tall and straight, wearing a green robe, which made him look noble and noble. Every step he took seemed to contain an inexhaustible magical power, which made everyone's heartbeat quicken. Seeing Luo Hanshan, Lin Qi's eyes burst out with an amazing fighting intent, but he soon calmed down. In Ouyang Ming's eyes, besides the fighting intent, there was more jealousy and ambition, which made him clench his fists tightly. As for Luo Hanshan, he seemed to be very calm, no one knew what he was thinking, only Yi Chen could clearly sense that he was slightly sighing. The young man's identity was obvious. He was indeed the most powerful young martial artist of the Windy Nation, the Emerald Young Master, Zhuang Fei. Chapter 125. Young Master Emerald, he is only at the early clasping Yuan realm, but he is giving people the pressure of a mid-clasping Yuan realm martial artist. His potential is limitless. A leader of a powerful party gasped. Leader Wang, you haven't heard of him, right? When young Master Emerald stepped into the clasping Yuan realm, he was ambushed by a mid-level ghost guard under the ghost artist's command, but was killed by him with a single palm attack. Mid-level ghost guard. Back then, the ghost artist was one of the 108 ghost warriors of the 9 ghost cult. His ghost guards were invincible, and all of them were elites among elites. To become a mid-level ghost guard, one had to be at least at the peak of early clasping Yuan realm. The higher one's cultivation level was, the harder it was to kill someone with a higher cultivation. When a martial artist was at the mortal realm, it was not difficult to kill someone with a higher cultivation, and when a martial artist reached the condensing reality realm, it was not difficult to kill someone with a higher cultivation. However, once a martial artist reached the clasping Yuan realm, killing someone with a higher cultivation would be quite difficult. Not to mention that those who could become mid-level ghost guards were all elites, and they could also kill people with a higher cultivation. Hearing this, the crowd looked at young Master Emerald in a different light. Most of them were at the mid-clasping Yuan realm, and only a few of them had reached the late-clasping Yuan realm. In other words, most of them did not have the confidence to fight against young Master Emerald. Young Master Emerald glanced at the crowd, and his eyes stopped on Luo Hanshan for a second, then he said, "Thank you all for coming to the celebration banquet. Zhuang Fei is deeply honored. In order to show the sincerity of the Emerald Martial Palace, there will be many wonderful performances today, I believe it will make you all happy." After saying some more appropriate words, young Master Emerald stepped back and gave the right to speak to the leader of the Emerald Martial Palace, Zhuang Qingxian. Zhuang Qingxian walked to the front and said with a loud voice, "Without further ado, let the celebration banquet begin." Immediately, the sound of musical instruments came from all around, including drums, flutes, and zither, which made the atmosphere on the stage even more relaxed. Soon, beautiful maids brought breakfast and tea to the crowd. After the tea, the performance officially began. The first performance was called Candle Blowing. A short middle-aged man who was at the early condensing reality realm walked on the stage. He placed 13 candles on the ground in an S shape, then stepped back for 10 steps and slowly circulated his chi. It was the first time for the crowd to see this kind of performance, so they all showed some interest. "Who?" The stocky middle-aged man spat out a mouthful of white gas. The white gas was like a dart, and it easily extinguished the first candle. Then, it bent to the side and extinguished the second candle, the third candle. When the 13th candle was extinguished, thunderous applause rang out. "Good, wonderful. It is quite rare for an early condensing reality realm warrior to be able to do this. Normally, the breath that came out of one's mouth would travel in a straight line, and would never bend. Although clasping Yuan realm warriors could do that, which clasping Yuan realm warrior would want to show his face and perform on the stage? Plus, a performance was a performance after all, and it would be meaningless if a powerful warrior went on the stage. Yi Chen applauded softly. It was indeed marvelous. The other party should have cultivated a cultivation art that allowed him to maintain his aura. After a long period of training, it would not be difficult for him to achieve this. The following performances became more and more exciting, and many people were attracted by them. There were also some people who chatted while watching the performances. If they were thirsty, there were all kinds of fruits on the table beside them. If they had any requests, they could ask the beautiful maidservant beside them. Before they knew it, it was already noon. The lunch was quite sumptuous. There were food that could fly in the sky, swim in the water, run in the mountains. As long as they could be found in the market, they could be found here, and even if they couldn't be found in the market, they could be found here. The wine was the Blue Sea 3 flavors, which cost 3,000 silvers per bottle, the top-grade wine of the Windy Nation. Taking a sip of the wine, Luo Hanshan said, "After lunch, the real business is about to start. Don't be careless." The head elder only said 4 words. The 3 of them nodded. Su Jing suddenly said to Yi Chen, "Shirpadian and that Emerald Martial Palace disciple have been staring at you, be careful." Yi Chen said, "I know." He had been wondering why Shirpadian would look so fierce from time to time. Although he had hidden it very well, it still couldn't escape from Yi Chen's senses. The other person should be the number 1 inner disciple of the Emerald Martial Palace, and he was probably here to deal with Yi Chen. On the side, the 4th elder hadn't said anything, but he was actually more anxious than anyone else. Luo Hanshan used to be one of the 4 young masters, but it was still unknown whether he was as powerful as a child now. He probably wouldn't be able to fight against the second-ranked disciples of the other martial institutions. He wasn't sure how powerful Su Jing was among the core disciples, but he only knew that the North Snow Fast Blade Lynch and the Stone Man Shirpadian were almost as powerful as a child. Fortunately, the Sky Cloud Martial School still had Yi Chen. Although he was still not powerful enough, as long as he didn't lose too badly, with his half-step sword intent, he would be able to save a lot of face. Thinking of this, the 4th elder glanced at Yi Chen expectantly. A fiery sun was shining in the sky, sprinkling down thousands of golden beams of light. In the Baohua Square, everyone's faces were filled with expectation, waiting for the next performance. Zhuang Qingxian cleared his throat and said with a smile, "I think you all know what's going to happen next." Yes, it's going to be a competition between the disciples of the top martial institutions and other powerful forces. You can't kill your opponent. If anyone dares to violate this rule, Zhuang Qingxian will have to teach you a lesson on behalf of your martial institutions. Also, the competition has to be consensual. If your opponent doesn't want to fight, you can't force him. Of course, I personally hope that everyone can participate. Leader Zhuang, we've been waiting for this moment, let's start. Leader Zhuang, time waits for no man, let's have a good show as soon as possible. Seeing some people showing an impatient look, Zhuang Qingxian smiled and said, "All right. The competition has officially started. Who wants to be the first one on the stage?" The ugly teenager from the Purple Sun Martial House stood up, walked to the stage and made a fist and palm salute. "I am Zhang Qing, a core disciple of the Purple Sun Martial House. I want to challenge the core disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial House, Su Jing. Su Jing, do you dare to fight with me?" The ugly teenager Zhang Qing had a cousin named Zhao Gua. During a mission, he had a conflict with Su Jing and was severely injured by her. This made the other disciples of the Purple Sun Martial House angry. After all, they rarely suffered losses, and Zhao Gua was one of the top 10 inner disciples. They could not accept that. After that, as long as there was a chance, the powerful disciples of the Purple Sun Martial House would try to find trouble with Su Jing. However, they did not expect her to be so powerful. None of the inner disciples were her opponents, and those who tried to find trouble with her were all severely injured and humiliated. Now that there was a chance, Zhang Qing wanted to teach Su Jing a lesson on behalf of the Purple Sun Martial House and his cousin. Why not? Su Jing, who was dressed in white, stood up and walked up slowly. Zhuang Qingxian said, "All right, the 2 of you should try your best to control yourselves. You don't have to win or lose." Then, he took a step back and sat on the wide chair behind him. Chapter 126. In the middle of the Baohua Plaza, Su Jing and Zhang Qing stood 30 steps away from each other. Although it is just a competition, I will not hold back. I hope you can last a little longer. A dim light flashed on the surface of the storage ring, and a huge purple sword appeared in Zhang Qing's hand. This sword was half the length of a human, and its body was wide and thick. It looked quite heavy. Su Jing was barehanded, she did not have any weapons, she said coldly, 10 attacks is more than enough to take care of you. Zhang Qing's expression froze, he laughed with a deep voice, alright, then I would like to see how you are going to beat me within 10 attacks. Don't cut your own tongue. Cut! Just as he finished talking, Zhang Qing held the sword with both of his hands and raised it high. Beams of purple and red light gathered on the tip of the sword, and he instantly threw it towards Su Jing. Shoo! 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 3 burning sword lights shot out, and even the air was melted. Su Jing was expressionless, but a huge fire halo appeared behind her head, shining brightly. With the help of the halo, Su Jing's aura suddenly increased, and she threw out 3 punches in a row towards the incoming sword light. Crack! Crackle! Like a popping sound, the sword light was shattered into pieces by Zhang Qing's fist power before it could even get close to Su Jing's body. Go down! Zhang Qing obviously did not expect 3 sword lights to be able to beat Su Jing. If he really could, then it would be too boring. As soon as Su Jing shattered the sword light, Zhang Qing took a step forward, turned into a shadow, and attacked towards Su Jing in an awkward way. The heavy sword body tore through the air, making a shrill sound. It was not hard to imagine that even with the Jinqi layer, it would not be able to block out this sword attack. Chin! Under everyone's shocked gaze, Su Jing adjusted her posture and threw out a punch that was covered in a golden light. The huge sword in Zhang Qing's hand was almost blown away. He was shocked. Although the sword in his hand was not a low-rank great sword, it was still one of the top of the normal great swords. Combined with his powerful Jinqi, it still could not compete with his opponent's fist. What a joke! Piss off! After blowing away the huge sword with one punch, a solid golden light burst out from Su Jing's body. Puff puff puff, at the critical moment, Zhang Qing condensed 6 purplish-red Jinqi shields in front of him. There was 1 in the middle, and 5 around him, protecting him tightly. However, he had underestimated the impact of the golden light and was forced to retreat. Yichen smiled faintly. To be honest, he wasn't worried about Su Jing at all. At this moment, she probably hadn't even used 60% of her strength, and the most terrifying thing about her was that she could use 60% of her strength to 80%, or even 90%. Of course, Zhang Qing did not use his full strength. It was just that it would be very difficult for him to defeat Su Jing. What the hell is Zhang Qing doing? Why isn't he using his full strength? On the Ziyang Martial School's side, Ouyang Ming, who was sitting on a chair, frowned. A few cracks appeared on the hard ground of the Baohua Square. Zhang Qing stopped and said in a low voice, "You are qualified enough for me to use my full power." After Zhang Qing finished speaking, a purplish-red light rose from his body. The light was like an inextinguishable flame, burning brighter and brighter. Finally, it flowed along Zhang Qing's hands and merged into the big sword, causing the whole big sword to be covered in flames. It was as dazzling as the sun in the sky. Purple Sun Sword Aura. As Zhang Qing swung his sword down, the purplish-red light transformed into a gigantic, illusory sword, which was tens of meters long, and swung towards Su Jing. The gigantic illusory sword was way too powerful, it even sucked up all the air in front of it. A loud sonic boom shook the air on the square like water ripples. This sword attack is quite powerful, I think she is going to lose. On the Emerald Martial School's side, Shirpadian was sitting there calmly, with a faint smile on his face. Luo Hanshan looked a bit worried. Zhang Qing's power was more or less out of his expectation, and this martial skill was not simple either. It was especially used to deal with warriors who liked to fight head-on. Unfortunately, Sister Su Jing was exactly this kind of warrior. Brother Luo, don't worry, Sister Su will win. For her, this is just an appetizer. Yi Chen said. Oh. I hope so. Luo Hanshan didn't know why Yi Chen was so confident in Sister Su Jing, but he knew that it would be great if Sister Su Jing could win. Lose. Zhang Qing gathered all of his Zhenqi into this sword attack, his face slightly blushed. Right at the moment when the sword attack was launched, Su Jing's eyes suddenly turned sharp. A burst of golden light burst forth, and another ring of flames condensed behind her head, trapping the first ring of flames within it. It was a ring within a ring. Luo Hanshan shouted in a low voice, the 8th level of the Golden Three-Realm Art. With the help of the 2 fiery halos, Su Jing's power increased by 30%, and the bright golden light had completely solidified, shooting straight up into the sky. Crack! She put her hands together, and the gigantic illusory sword was blocked by Su Jing, without moving even a little bit. As she suddenly shook it, the gigantic sword exploded, and Zhang Qing was sent flying backwards while vomiting blood. 3 moves, you're only at this level. Su Jing's face didn't even blush, and she didn't even gasp for breath. You! Zhang Qing crawled back up from the ground, and vomited another mouthful of blood. Zhuang Qingxian glanced at Su Jing in surprise, then raised his voice and said, "All right, the first round is over, who else wants to go?" Shirpadian stared at Yi Chen, and sent a message to the handsome teenager standing next to him, "Qingjun, you go and try that Yi Chen. If he can't beat him, I'll have to do it myself." Originally, he wanted to do it himself, but after careful consideration, he felt that it was a bit inappropriate. Yi Chen had just become famous not long ago, and he wasn't even a true core disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School yet, while Shirpadian was already one of the top 4 core disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace. Even if he beat Yi Chen, people would still gossip about him, which was not a good idea. Therefore, it would be better to let Qingjun, who was also the #1 inner disciple of the Emerald Martial Palace, go first. Although Qingjun wasn't a core disciple yet, his fighting power could be ranked in the top 15 among the core disciples. If everything went well, it wouldn't be too hard for him to beat Yi Chen. Qingjun, who was even more handsome than a girl, responded, "Brother Shi, he has only mastered the half-step sword intent, his power is very weak. There is no need for you to do it, I can beat him easily." Shirpadian nodded and said, "Remember, don't let him have an easy time. Don't worry, I have been cultivating the great natural splitting force. Once I do, I will make him lie on the bed for at least 10 days or half a month. As for stopping when the time is right, that's just for show. Do you really want to have a friendly competition? That would be too boring." Shirpadian slightly nodded, then looked at Yi Chen with a hideous smile on his face, and thought, "It seems that I don't have to do it anymore. Qingjun alone is enough to disappoint you. Leader, I want to challenge Yi Chen of the Sky Cloud Martial School." Qingjun stood up and walked up. Zhuang Qingxian laughed out loud and said, "Good, you are the #1 inner disciple of the Emerald Martial Palace, and Yi Chen is the #1 inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. Yi Chen, do you dare to fight me?" Qingjun looked at Yi Chen. Chapter 127. All of a sudden, everyone turned to look at Yi Chen. Those leaders who had been to the Sky Cloud Martial School to watch the inner disciple ranking competition all knew him, while those who had never been there were all talking about him. He is that Yi Chen, he is so young. At such a young age, he has already mastered the half-step sword intent, how incredible. Once he masters the real sword intent, his potential will be as great as that of the Emerald Child. Unfortunately, he is still not there yet. Yeah, that Qingjun, the #1 inner disciple of the Emerald Martial Palace, has such a strong Zhenqi vibration, he has obviously reached the peak of the late condensing reality realm. Since Zhuang Qingxian let him fight, he must be very powerful, maybe he is already at the top of the core disciples. Top of the core disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace, this is very valuable, Yi Chen should be able to win. Most of the people did not think highly of Yi Chen, but they were very optimistic about his future. After all, he was the first one among the young generation who had mastered the half-step sword intent, it was very likely that he would be able to master the real sword intent in the future. Slowly standing up, Yi Chen did not say anything and walked straight onto the stage. You have mastered the half-step sword intent, not bad, but you have to remember, in this world, power is everything, no one cares about what you have actually mastered. Seeing Yi Chen walk onto the stage without hesitation, Qing Jun sneered, slightly raised his chin and looked down at Yi Chen. Yi Chen said calmly, "You are right, power is everything, you are barely enough to make me fight with all of my power. Don't be so arrogant, don't think that just because you are the #1 inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School, you are just an ordinary inner disciple in the Emerald Martial Palace." Qing Jun did not give any face to the head elder of the Sky Cloud Martial School. He tried his best to belittle the average level of the disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School. The head elder's face was filled with anger. The Emerald Martial Palace was getting more and more arrogant. Even a small inner disciple did not put the Sky Cloud Martial School in his eyes. In the past, they only talked behind their backs, but now, they said it right in front of him. Ha! The head elder snorted coldly. His voice contained a clasping Yuan realm Zhen Qi. Everyone could sense the head elder's anger. Zhuang Qingxian glanced at the head elder of the Sky Cloud Martial School and scolded Qing Jun, "Everything will be judged by the public, how dare you judge it yourself?" Although Qing Jun didn't sense Zhuang Qingxian's anger, he knew that he couldn't go overboard. He immediately cupped his fists towards the crowd and said, "Qing Jun is a straightforward person. I've made a fool of myself." After that, his eyes turned sharp and he said to Yi Chen, "Whether what I said is true or not, let the results prove it." Buzz! The storage ring flickered with a dim light, and the hidden cloud sword appeared in Yi Chen's hand. He slowly unsheathed the sword and pointed it at Qing Jun. Yi Chen said coldly, "If I can't defeat you within 5 movements, I lose." Everyone was shocked by his words. The head elder's face darkened. Before he came here, he had told Yi Chen not to act impulsively. In here, he was not only representing himself, but the entire Sky Cloud Martial School, and he had to think about the Sky Cloud Martial School first. How could he have completely forgotten about that? Defeating Qing Jun within 5 movements was not an easy task, and if he failed to do so, everyone would undoubtedly look down on him and think that he was a braggart. Luo Hanshan couldn't help but say, "Brother Yi, you are too impulsive." Not necessarily. Su Jing was a man of few words. The fourth elder gave a bitter smile and said, "Do you really think that Yi Chen can defeat Qing Jun within 5 movements? If I'm not wrong, this Qing Jun is at least one of the top core disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace. Although I hate to admit it, judging only from the sense of power released from his body, he can be ranked in the top 7 or even the top 6 among all the core disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School." Besides some of the leaders, the young generation all shook their heads as well. They all thought that Yi Chen was too arrogant, especially Sherpadian. He sneered in his mind, it would have been better if Yi Chen hadn't said those words, but if he failed to do so, then he would have lost a lot of face. I can't believe that this Yi Chen is even more stupid and arrogant than I thought. Ouyang Ming sneered, reckless. On the Rudra Martial School's side, Yuan Xuemei had long hated Qing Jun. She actually hoped that Yi Chen could defeat Qing Jun within 5 movements, although it was almost impossible. "You are looking for death." Qing Jun's clothes started to flutter even though there was no wind. Beams of cyan and purple light burst out from his body. He moved his feet slightly, leaving cracks on the ground. His whole body shot out like a blade, his palm was as straight as a blade, and he threw out a palm attack. Swoosh! The air was sliced open, and a cyan and purple light blade shot out from his palm, attacking towards Yi Chen. Yi Chen did not step back, instead, his calm temperament suddenly turned sharp. Wave after wave of sword power burst out from his body. His whole body seemed to have turned into a cloud, a sword that was accumulating power, and was about to explode with an amazing destructive power. First movement. As he stabbed out with his sword, Yi Chen's whole body turned illusory. His sword power was not stable, and his figure was not stable either. He was like a floating cloud in the sky, and was not bound by his normal state. Crack! The cyan and purple light blade went through Yi Chen's illusory figure, leaving a deep crack on the ground. At the same time, Yi Chen's sword had already pierced towards Qing Jun's chest. What kind of sword art is this? Qing Jun was shocked. He didn't expect that Yi Chen's sword art and body movement would be so weird. He was about to hit his opponent, but he missed it by a hair's breadth. A trace of anger flashed past Qing Jun's face. He crazily activated his Jin Qi. Natural purple crystal Qi. The cyan and purple light gathered together and condensed into a purple crystal-like shield in front of Qing Jun's chest. The shield was crystal clear, and had 8 flat surfaces. The edges of the shield were emitting a faint halo, firmly protecting Qing Jun's body. As for the other parts of his body, they were also covered by a layer of purple crystal Qi. Yi Chen didn't make any changes, he still stabbed out with his hidden cloud sword. The sword power contained a horrifying half-step sword intent, which made it even more condensed. Puff! The purple crystal shield was broken, it couldn't even block a little bit of Yi Chen's attack. What? The natural purple crystal Qi was broken. Shirpadian clenched his fist so hard that the teacup he had just picked up was smashed into pieces. The tea splashed everywhere. No wonder he was so shocked. The natural purple crystal Qi was one of the natural great splitting force, which was a low-rank Earth realm martial art from the Emerald Martial Palace. It was not weaker than Lu Wuxiang's blue murderous Qi. In terms of destructive power, it was even more powerful. An ordinary late condensing reality realm martial artist might not be able to break the natural purple crystal Qi even if he used all of his power. But now, it couldn't even block a single sword attack from Yi Chen. Young Master Emerald's expression slightly changed. The power of the half-step sword intent had really surprised him. Piss off! Qing Jun yelled out. The natural purple crystal Qi around his body grew thicker and thicker once again, it slowed down the sword tip. After that, he raised his right hand and slapped towards Yi Chen's head. The strong wind blew Yi Chen's hair into the air. He also yelled out. Dominate the world! Boom! All of the surrounding Yuan Qi was sucked out and injected into Yi Chen's left fist. Yi Chen then threw out his fist with an unstoppable power, clashing against Qing Jun's palm attack. There was no expected loud bang, neither were there any broken bricks or people flying away. The black light and the cyan purple light were devouring each other, trying their best to fight against each other. Some of the weaker young warriors felt a bit uncomfortable. It was as if they knew that thunder was coming, but they could only see lightning bolts flashing across the sky, without any sound of thunder. It was both weird and depressing. Right at this moment, a thunderous boom finally broke out. The black light and cyan purple light scattered on the stage, shooting out in all directions. Such a strong Qi power. The leaders of the powerful parties all made their moves. They created a thick layer of Qi wall in front of their own area, blocking the Qi power from spreading and destroying the surrounding area. All of a sudden, the transparent Qi wall started to ripple. The two of them separated right after they touched each other. Yi Chen was still in the air, he waved out a sword attack. Limitless Cloud. The thick sword Qi was extremely powerful. Wherever it went, the air seemed to have been swept away. It then hacked towards Qing Jun along with a destructive power. Damn it! Qing Jun was extremely angry. He gathered all of his Jin Qi into his right palm and threw it towards the sword Qi. Crackle! The Jin Qi on the edge of his palm was completely broken. Qing Jun spat out a mouthful of blood. His meridians had been injured by the remaining sword Qi. Unbelievable! The two had only exchanged 3 attacks, and Qing Jun had already been injured. Was he really defeated in 5 attacks? Half-step sword intent is even more powerful than I had imagined. Luckily, it is not the real sword intent yet. Otherwise, Qing Jun would not have been able to handle the first attack. But there are still 2 more attacks left. Qing Jun should be able to handle it. If he couldn't handle it, then he would lose face. Before, he had been trying to belittle the average level of the Sky Cloud Martial School's disciples. But now, He has been defeated in 5 attacks. It is like being slapped in the face. Seeing Qing Jun being injured, everyone was shocked. Yi Chen, you want to defeat me in 5 attacks? In your dreams. I will make you regret it. Qing Jun's eyes were completely red. He forcibly activated his Jin Qi and crushed the sword Qi that had invaded his body. Then, he walked towards Yi Chen step by step. With every step he took, the ground would crack, and the natural amethyst Qi around his body would increase by a bit. By the 7th step, the natural amethyst Qi had condensed into the shape of a sharp blade. At this moment, Qing Jun had already surpassed his own limit. He had forcibly pushed his natural splitting force to the peak of the 8th level, and his Jin Qi had condensed into the shape of a blade. Break! Facing Yi Chen, Qing Jun raised his right hand high and swung it forward. Swoosh! The side blade phantom followed Qing Jun's hand gesture and flew out, the aftershock cutting terrifying cracks on the surface of the square. The surrounding air was like water, with many wrinkles appearing, cut by the side blade phantom one by one, and then exploded into pieces, exploding into turbulence. The peak of the 8th level of the natural splitting force, I can definitely defeat him. Sure Potion's eyes were fixed on the square, he couldn't wait to see Yi Chen's body being smashed into pieces. Ouyang Ming sneered. Yi Chen, who had mastered the half-step sword intent, would be a threat sooner or later. It was a good thing that he had been defeated now. Su Jing and Luo Hanshan both frowned slightly. By now, she was no longer sure that Yi Chen would be able to defeat Qing Jun. After all, Qing Jun's breakthrough was way too sudden. No one had expected that the pressure and humiliation would actually help him break through. Compared to Yi Chen's luck was way too bad. Facing this horrifying attack, the Jin Qi inside Yi Chen's body exploded on its own. Vaguely, there seemed to be an invisible barrier in the deepest part of his dantian being broken. The circulation speed of his Jin Qi increased drastically, and the natural Yuan Qi poured into his body like a funnel. Right then, Yi Chen had also made a breakthrough just like Qing Jun. But the difference was that his cultivation had reached the late condensing reality realm. Feeling the powerful Jin Qi circulating inside his body, Yi Chen raised his eyes. His sharp gaze was almost tangible, and it turned into an illusory sword Qi that shot out, piercing everyone's eyes. Chapter 128. Lu Hanshan was shocked. Brother Yi has reached the late condensing reality realm. Lu Hanshan was already shocked when he heard that Qing Jun had already reached the peak of the 8th stage of the great natural splitting force. He felt that this kind of thing was very rare. Not every pressure could help a person make progress, otherwise, the whole true spirit realm would be in chaos, with people fighting each other to death every day. It could only be said that pressure could help a person make a breakthrough. However, he didn't expect that Yi Chen had also made a breakthrough, and it was a breakthrough in his cultivation, directly reaching the late condensing reality realm from the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm. Judging from the great Yuan Qi vibration, his late condensing reality realm cultivation seemed to be much more solid than ordinary people, and his Jin Qi didn't seem to be unstable at all. Ha! Yi Chen took a step forward, along with which, sharp airflows spread out in all directions. It was as if Yi Chen's entire body had been merged with the eye of a storm, and a shocking sword aura rose into the sky. He held the sword with one hand and simply swung it down. My sword! What's going on? Why did my sword come out of the sheath by itself? There were many inner disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace on the scene, and many of them had swords with them. However, at this moment, their swords flew out of their sheaths uncontrollably, attacking towards Qing Jun along with Yi Chen's sword aura. A few of them were relatively powerful, and managed to grab onto their swords in time. However, no matter how hard they tried to activate their Jin Qi, their swords still couldn't stop shaking. Ha! One of the inner elders of the Emerald Martial Palace snorted and waved his hand, cutting off the connection between the sword intent and those swords. Without the support of those swords, although the thick sword Qi released by Yi Chen wasn't as powerful as before, it was still extremely sharp. Waves of white Qi were formed behind the sword Qi, which looked like rapidly changing clouds, pushing the sword chi forward. Crack! The sword chi clashed with the blade silhouette, and in the next moment, the blade silhouette was cut into two. The sword chi, which had shrunk to 1/3 of its original size, didn't lose any of its power, and fiercely struck on Cheng Jun's protective purple crystal chi. A shocking amount of blood splattered out, and a sword wound appeared on Cheng Jun's chest. It was so deep that it could reach his bones, and this was because the sword chi had changed direction midway and flew into the sky. Cheng Jun's chest wound was only cut by the aftershock of the sword chi. Otherwise, he would not be alive. Puff! Cheng Jun spat out a mouthful of blood. This mouthful of blood actually contained traces of sword chi, and it pierced through the ground. His face instantly turned pale and bloodless, and he was about to kneel on the ground. Suddenly, a figure landed beside Cheng Jun and supported him. He was an inner elder of the Emerald Martial Palace. For moves, he defeated Cheng Jun with 4 moves. That sword move just now has touched the edge of sword intent, right? Yes, I also felt a sharp intent sweep through my heart. I thought it was just an illusion. I heard that once the sword intent is unleashed, it can sever the will of the void, making it impervious to all evils. What ability does this kid possess to actually touch sword insight first? Alas! Of course, most of them were jealous. At their age, it would be very difficult for them to improve their cultivation. They could only improve their combat strength in other aspects. Without a doubt, sword intent and saber intent were the dream of all of them. If these 2 things could be bought, they would buy them even if they had to spend all their wealth. They would do so at all costs. On the Sky Cloud Martial School's side, the head elder and the 4th elder let out a relieved smile. Yi Chen's outstanding performance was already a well-known fact, and they would definitely report it to their leader when they got back. Lu Hanshan shook his head, looked at Su Jing and said, "Amazing, now I finally understand what you mean. Perhaps, he can lead us out of the Windy Nation and compete with those young geniuses from the South Shore region." Su Jing didn't answer, but instead, she asked, "You are also at the child level now, right?" Lu Hanshan didn't respond, but his eyes were shining brightly. The Emerald Martial Palace's inner elder, who was holding Cheng Jun's arm, helped him to expel the sword chi from his body. Seeing that Cheng Jun was severely wounded, he abruptly turned around, looked at Yi Chen and yelled harshly, "It's just a competition, but you attacked so cruelly. Let me teach you a lesson." After saying that, he threw a slap towards Yi Chen. Bang! The air vibrated intensely, and Yi Chen was forced to step back. In front of him, the Sky Cloud Martial School's head elder appeared out of nowhere, smashed his opponent's palm attack with a single slap, and yelled, "Cheng Yu, don't go too far. Yi Chen has already shown you mercy, do you really think that you can bully our Sky Cloud Martial School's disciples? You!" That Emerald Martial Palace's inner elder had a fierce look in his eyes. Cheng Jun was his grandson, and he had always had high hopes for him. But today, not only was he defeated within 4 moves, he had also suffered a serious internal injury. He felt that his blood was rushing to his head, and he was about to lose his mind. Zhuang Qingxian threw a complicated glance at Yi Chen, then yelled at the Emerald Martial Palace's inner elder, "Haven't you lost enough face? Take Cheng Jun to get his wounds treated." After the inner elder took Cheng Jun away, Zhuang Qingxian took a deep breath and said, "This is just a competition, I hope you guys can control yourselves, don't force yourselves to fight." Just now, Yi Chen had indeed shown mercy to Cheng Jun. Therefore, Zhuang Qingxian didn't dare to say anything, otherwise, he would leave an unfair impression on the crowd, which would damage his reputation. After that, the competition continued. However, all of the battles were between the young warriors from the other big powers. None of the truly powerful young warriors felt that it was not the right time yet. At this moment, Shirpatian was very unhappy. Just now, he had taken a glance at Ji Shuyan, and found that she had been staring at Yi Chen without even noticing him. This made him feel that he had been completely ignored. Although she had never been very interested in him before, at least she had maintained a certain amount of respect for him. In his eyes, their relationship was already quite good, and there was still some hope. However, right now, that little hope had been completely destroyed. Yi Chen, don't think too highly of yourself just because you've won against Qingjun. The real child-level power is not something you can imagine. After a few more battles, I will let you know what the gap between us is, and what despair is. I will destroy your half-step sword intent, and make you wish you were dead. Sure Potion's expression was still the same, but his mind was in turmoil. He had already come up with a plan, which was to completely shatter Yi Chen's confidence. A sword artist who had lost his confidence would probably lose his sword intent, not to mention that Yi Chen hadn't even comprehended the real sword intent yet. Sure Padian glanced at Yi Chen with an evil look in his eyes. Among the inner disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace, Yi Xian stared at Yi Chen, who was sitting on the chair. Just now, if it weren't for the inner elders, her sword would have been unsheathed by itself and merged with Yi Chen's sword aura. She couldn't understand how a man who used to be so useless could suddenly shine so brightly, and it was getting brighter and brighter, almost reaching the peak of the young generation in the Windy Nation. Sister Yi, he can only be arrogant for a short while. This time, Brother Shi will teach him a lesson. Cui Shiming, who was standing on the side, said casually. Yi Xian paused for a second. That's not going to be easy. You underestimate Brother Shi too much. Not to mention Yi Chen, even young Master North Snow and young Master Duanmu might not be able to win against Brother Shi. He has already reached the real child-level power, he only needs the title of child. After saying these words, Cui Shiming felt very proud. He knew that once Sherpadian attacked, he would definitely make his opponent pay a great price. As for what the price would be, he didn't know. However, he knew that he had to work even harder in the future. Yi Xian was very talented, and her current power was almost the same as his. It was very likely that she would surpass him in the future, which made him feel a bit threatened. I, Yu, would like to challenge the core disciple of the Rudra Martial School, Nangong Yun. As another round of sparring ended, from the North Snow Martial Academy, Blade Yu suddenly walked out and challenged Rain Man Nangong Yun. It's Blade Yu. Before Lynch grew up, he was recognized as the second most powerful warrior among the young generation in the North Snow Martial Academy. Yu's blade skills are extremely powerful. Although Lynch has caught up with him, he still might not be able to beat him. But Rain Man Nangong Yun is not bad either. I heard that he has received the teachings of the leader of the Rudra Martial School, and is training the Sky Holy Water spell. Sky Holy Water spell? Isn't it the early stage of the South Rudra Martial School's most powerful spell? Everyone was talking about it. Although the sparring between Yi Chen and Qingjun was very interesting, it was not a child-level battle after all. Currently, other than young Master North Snow and young Master Duanmu, there were Sherpadian and Lu Wuxiang from the Emerald Martial Palace, Qin Yulian from the South Rudra Martial School, Zhu Mei from the Sky Cloud Martial School, Ouyang Lai from the Purple Sun Martial School, and Lynch from the North Snow Martial Academy. The others could only be considered as potential child-level warriors. Blade Yu and Rain Man Nangong Yun were one of them. Of course, although it was widely acknowledged, there were still some inaccuracies. Maybe the child-level warriors were not that powerful, and the potential child-level warriors were the real child-level warriors. Nangong Yun walked out with a smile on his face. Yu, I knew you would challenge me. The fight from half a year ago is not over yet. That's right. We have to find a winner in this fight. There are too many powerful warriors nowadays. If we don't work hard to break through, there will be no place for us. Yu was more than 2 meters tall, with a strong and sturdy waist. As he stood there, a powerful blade aura spread out in all directions. It was as if he had turned into a blade, a heavy and fast blade, ready to launch a fatal attack at any time. Nangong Yun said seriously, if that's the case, then let's do it. I also hope to find a breakthrough from the pressure. Crazy demon blade. Yu was like a ferocious tiger. He took a step forward, and the distance of dozens of steps was completely ignored. His blade split the air open, and along with the illusory blade shadows, he hacked towards Nangong Yun. Chin. Nangong Yun waved her hand, and a wave of water-like Jin Qi spread out. It turned into dozens of transparent sword lights in the air, flying towards the blade shadows. Seeing Nangong Yun's attack, Yi Chen was shocked. What a great skill! She has refined her Jin Qi to be like water, but heavier than water. Just like heavy water, one drop of Jin Qi would weigh hundreds of pounds, and dozens of drops would be almost impossible to block. Luo Hanshan, who was quite knowledgeable, explained to Yi Chen, the leader of the Rudra martial school has a very mysterious background, no one knows where she came from. She rose to power in a mysterious way, then founded one of the top 5 martial institutions, the Rudra martial school. The most powerful martial art of the Rudra martial school is called the holy water spell. It is very magical. It is said that once you cultivate it to the extreme, a single drop of Jin Qi can weigh tens of thousands of pounds, and you can even control the rain and increase the amount of water in a certain area. This holy water spell is the early stage of the holy water spell. It should only have 1/5 of the power of the Rudra martial school, but it is still very powerful. Yi Chen nodded. He had heard about the leader of the Rudra martial school before. Although she was a woman, she was as ambitious as any man. She had built the Rudra martial school into one of the top 5 martial institutions. In terms of overall power, she was even slightly stronger than the Sky Cloud martial school. Of course, the Sky Cloud martial school was actually very powerful before. However, after being tricked by the Purple Sun martial school, they lost a lot of their powerful martial artists and fell from rank 8 to rank 9. Even now, they were still trying to recover. Facing the powerful Jin Qi, Yu Yu was not afraid at all. He waved his heavy long blade and the strong blade light made the water splash. 8 mountain-breaking movements. Suddenly, Yu Yu leapt up and threw out a normal-looking blade attack. Puff! Nangong Yun's Jin Qi was cut open layer by layer, and the cracks spread quickly. Some of the Jin Qi in the shape of water drops even fell on the ground, creating thousands of holes. Water curtain combined. Taking 3 steps back, Nangong Yun put her palms together and pushed forward. Walala! The rest of the Jin Qi turned into a water ball and clashed with Yu Yu's long blade, forcing Yu Yu to take dozens of steps back. Chapter 129. Great! The Sky Holy Water spell is indeed worthy of its reputation. Now, take my second movement. With a single kick, the blade aura around Yu Yu's body became even more aggressive. He held the blade in his hand and swung it horizontally. Woo woo woo, the blade light was as fast as lightning, it covered a distance of 20 steps in just one attack. Nangong Yun did not dare to underestimate the attacking power of the blade light. The water Jin Qi around his body suddenly increased by a few times, it looked like a stream of water between him and the blade light. Boom! The water formed by the Jin Qi shot out in all directions. Each drop of water was extremely destructive, it could easily kill a normal mid-condensing reality realm warrior. Third movement. Yu Yu was about to attack for the 3rd time. Yu Yu, do you really think you can beat me? Water Wolf 10 Shadow Kill. Nangong Yun did not wait for his opponent to attack, he drew a circle in front of him with his right arm. The surging water Jin Qi came out of the circle, it turned into countless evil wolves that jumped towards Yu Yu. Crack! One of the wolves jumped on Yu Yu's body, it bit a hole in his protective Jin Qi. Yu Yu laughed, his body shook, the wolf formed from Jin Qi was shattered. The long blade in his hand was not slow at all, he slashed at the heads of the wolves that jumped on him. Water Wolf 100 Shadow Kill. The previous move was just a buffer for the next move. With enough time, Nangong Yun's body emitted a domineering aura that was different from his appearance, his gentle face also became stern, both of his hands simultaneously drew a circle, the majestic water wave Jin Qi compressed into a ball, and rushed out. Awoo, 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 the water ball that was half the size of a human suddenly exploded, dozens of calf-sized evil wolves jumped towards Yu Yu. That horrifying aura made some of the young warriors with lower cultivation turn pale. They thought to themselves, if they had to face this attack, not even their bones would be left. Yu Yu looked extremely serious. His opponent was even more powerful than he had imagined. However, he was born with a wild aura. He was not scared at all. He roared and rushed up. Fourth movement. Fifth movement. Sixth movement. Seventh mountain splitter. Brandishing his blade 4 times in a row, the wolves formed from Jin Chi exploded one after another, leaving only a few big and small cats. However, the situation was even more dangerous than before. Nangong Yun's imposing aura was even more vigorous and powerful, and a prehistoric evil chi burst out from his body. Rumble. The ground around Nangong Yun's body started to shake. The water ripples around Nangong Yun's body started to expand and change shape, as if some kind of powerful creature was about to be born and devour everything. He couldn't wait any longer. Yu Yu's scalp went numb. He knew that if he continued to wait, he would be in a very bad situation. Surging pure chi gathered in his arms, Yu Yu raised both of his hands up high. The ferocious blade aura caused the air to become chaotic, forming a huge whirlpool. Mountain Splitter 8. As the saber slashed out, the airflow around Nangong Yu abruptly split apart. It was as if the airflow had solidified. It was clear how powerful the saber's oppressive force was. Nangong Yun's clothes fluttered in the wind as she suddenly twisted her hands. Tiger Shark Break. Rumble. The water ripples finally condensed and turned into a 20 meters long terrifying tiger shark. The tiger shark shook its head and tail. Not only did it swallow the saber light, it also swallowed Yu Yu. Yang Ming gasped. How could this Nangong Yun be so powerful as well? Besides the fact that they were evenly matched at the beginning, she had been suppressing Yu Yu. Materializing Jin Chi is indeed powerful. It was also Yi Chen's first time witnessing a battle of this level. It was indeed not something a normal peak late condensing reality realm warrior could compare with. Pop! The tiger shark's tail suddenly exploded. A beam of saber light landed on Nangong Yun's protective Jin Chi layer. Nangong Yun's face turned pale as blood leaked out from the corner of her mouth. Her body was pushed back for more than 10 steps. She then looked at Yu Yu. Right now, he was bleeding from all 7 of his orifices. He had finally broken the tiger shark with a single attack. He stood there without moving, looking extremely aggressive. You are much more powerful than half a year ago. Nangong Yun said slowly. Yu Yu grinned. Unfortunately, I lost to you. Before he could finish, Yu Yu puked out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale. Nangong Yun shook her head. I had also exhausted all my abilities. Let's call it a draw. A loss is a loss. Who do you think I am? Just keep working hard. I will not lose again next time. It seemed like Yu Yu was quite injured. He was staggering a bit when he turned around. Nangong Yun smiled and went back to her seat. Your saber was a bit slow, otherwise you could have broken the Jin Chi tiger shark. As Yu Yu sat down, Lynch suddenly said. Yu Yu was a bit shocked. He took a deep look at Lynch. The head elder of the North Snow Martial Academy smiled. Although Yu Yu had lost, at least he had injured Nangong Yun, which was not too bad. Besides, they still had Lynch, who was even more powerful. Shirpadian was a bit surprised by Nangong Yun's power, but he didn't care too much about it. In this competition, he only wanted to beat 2 people. One was Lu Hanshan, who used to be one of the top 4 childs. Only by beating him would he be able to inherit the title of child. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a proper title. He was quite confident about this. He only needed to go through the formality. Of course, before that, he needed to take care of Yi Chen first, destroy his half-step sword intent, and make him wish he was dead. Unfortunately, it was not the right time yet. If he challenged Yi Chen right away, people would easily think that he was trying to take revenge for Qing Jun by challenging Yi Chen on purpose. In this way, Yi Chen would be able to seize the opportunity to refuse the challenge. He could even use the excuse that he had consumed too much of his power and hadn't fully recovered yet. Those people who were watching the fight would definitely stand on his side. If he didn't attack, then he would leave no room for his opponent to retreat. Ichim. I'll let you be arrogant for a bit longer. Sherpadian tried his best to control his impulsive emotions. The competition was a friendly competition between disciples from all the top martial institutions and powerful forces. It could not only make the disciples feel pressured, but also help them learn something from the intense fights. Even if they couldn't make a breakthrough right now, they could still strengthen themselves and prepare for future breakthroughs. At this moment, a disciple challenged Yuan Xuemei. The crowd looked over and saw that he was wearing a yellow robe with a black snake pattern embroidered on his sleeves. It was the symbol of the Black Snake Martial School, one of the 4 rank 9 institutions in the Windy Nation. It turned out that this person was the head disciple of the Black Snake Martial School. He knew that he had no chance of winning against the other disciples from the top martial institutions. Only Yuan Xuemei, who was not that famous, seemed to be a bit easier to deal with. If he could beat her, it would be a great honor. After all, beating a top disciple from a top martial institution was something that not many people could do. Yuan Xuemei smiled. She had been waiting for someone to challenge her for a long time, in case the others would think that she was a pushover. Spring lingering. She threw out a sword attack. Fine sword lights were like the spring breeze or the rain, softly and powerlessly coiling around her opponent's protective Jinqi. Puff, 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 this seemingly soft sword attack immediately released a shocking power. That Black Snake Martial School's head disciple's protective Jinqi was like a piece of tofu, full of holes. Yichen raised his eyebrows. This time, Yuan Xuemei must have used the Rudra Martial School's 4 seasons sword art. It seemed that after her cultivation had improved, the Rudra Martial School had also started to focus on training her. They had even made an exception and taught her the 4 seasons sword art, instead of the 4 seasons rain sword art. After dozens of attacks, the head disciple couldn't even touch the corner of Yuan Xuemei's clothes. Instead, he was so embarrassed that he had to give up and leave the stage. All of a sudden, the Baohua Square, which had been filled with discussions, suddenly quieted down. Everyone saw Ouyang Ming, the second core disciple of the Purple Sun Martial School, walk up to the stage. It's Ouyang Ming. Another child-level warrior. Who is he going to challenge? Is it Lu Wuxiang from the Emerald Martial School or Sherpadian? How is that possible? The Purple Sun Martial School and the Emerald Martial School have been very close in recent years. Their disciples often gather together, it's not very likely for them to fight against each other. I think he is going to challenge Luo Hanshan from the Sky Cloud Martial School, Child Hanshan. Why didn't I think of this? Although Luo Hanshan is not as powerful as he used to be, his reputation is still there. If he can't beat him, no one will be able to take away the child title. Hearing the discussions around him, Ouyang Ming sneered while looking at Luo Hanshan. Luo Hanshan, today, you will give up your child title. How can people accept you if you keep taking it? Luo Hanshan walked up expressionlessly and said, the child title is not a big deal to me, but if you want to take it away, you will have to ask me first. Do you think it's still 2 years ago? With your current power, you don't deserve the child title anymore. It's time for someone more powerful to take it. Ouyang Ming sneered. Since you are so confident, come and take it. I'm just afraid that you will not be able to accept the result. Luo Hanshan was standing 30 steps in front of Ouyang Ming. He was wearing a blue robe and had no weapon in his hands. He looked very calm, neither humble or arrogant, just like a mountain that had been through a lot, and was calmly facing everything. Yichen said to Su Jing, Brother Luo, it seems like you have hidden your strength quite well. Su Jing said, you saw it? Just intuition. Although I don't like Ouyang Ming, his power is indeed very powerful. I'm afraid it will be a tough fight. Yichen scanned the two of them with his soul power, and sensed that they were completely opposite. If Luo Hanshan was a quiet mountain, or a rock in the ocean, then Ouyang Ming would be a violent volcano that could erupt at any time and burn everything in its path. If you can take this kick without stepping back, then you are qualified for me to use all of my power. Ouyang Ming's body floated up into the air, giving people a very gentle feeling. However, as he threw out his kick, that feeling completely changed. This kick was like an erupting volcano, accompanied by thunderbolts and raging floods. The violent power made people feel like a natural disaster was coming, which made people feel very nervous and anxious. It's just a kick, I'll take it. Luo Hanshan's pupils suddenly changed color, and a strong purple light spurted out from his eyes. Behind his back, a bridge-like purple mist appeared, reaching to the void behind him, as if it was trying to bring something terrifying over and strengthen itself. The 9th level of the purple extreme art, purple chi from the east. The head elder popped up his eyes and said word by word. Hearing this, Yichen seemed to be thinking about something. The purple extreme art was the most magical one among all the low-rank Earth Realm martial arts of the Sky Cloud Martial School. The 8th level was called Purple Eyes Ice Heart, and the 9th level was called Purple Chi from the East. Once a martial artist reached the 9th level, he or she would be able to draw purple chi from the void into his or her body and increase his or her fighting power. It was said that once a martial artist reached the peak of the 9th level of the purple extreme art, he or she would be able to draw a purple lotus, which would protect his or her body and greatly increase his or her defensive power.